Well, hello there, teacher friends. Christina Whitlock here, letting you know that today is pretty much the best day ever because we get to celebrate being together for 200 episodes. 200 episodes in just a little over 4 years. It's been a lot of work. I'm still working my way through lots of technological learning curves, and I've thought about quitting more times than I can count. And yet, here I am, 200 episodes in as your anytime piano teacher friend. What an honor. Today's episode is an extra special one. I'm following suit from some of my favorite podcasters, and I am attempting to offer a one-sentence, sometimes two-sentence recap of every episode of this show so far. I'm leading by example here because one of the most important things we can learn as teachers is how to express ourselves concisely. It's a big reason why I try to keep every episode under 20 minutes over here. I think most ideas worth learning can be communicated in 20 minutes or less. I feel that way about sermons in church, conference presentations, you name it. But that's hard to do, friends. So for 200 episodes now, plus a few bonuses, I have been painstakingly whittling down my ideas to 20 minutes or less. And now I've challenged myself to take each of those nuggets down to one sentence. It has been the ultimate exercise in brevity, which is probably good for me. Now, before you get panicky, today's episode notes contain a summary of every one of these statements, as well as its corresponding episode. So if you hear something today that sparks your attention, simply visit christinawhitlock.com/episode 200. That's my name, christinawhitlock.com/episode 200 for a full recap of every single one of these ideas. So friends, this is definitely going to be longer than 20 minutes, but without further delay, I offer you 199 lessons explored in the Beyond Measure podcast. The power of legacy in our profession, generation after generation of the student becoming the teacher, is always worth celebrating. Students need to feel 3 things to be successful in their lessons. They need to feel capable, accountable, and invested in. I wish I would have appreciated the seasons when my studio was smaller instead of being so worried about what other people thought. Coming up with a one-sentence response to the question of why should someone study music is a really valuable exercise in developing your own philosophy of teaching. It's easy to love students with charismatic personalities, but our opportunity for impact on the quiet ones might be even more valuable. We are all wrong about something, maybe many somethings. Just as we all have amazing teachers in our past, sometimes it's worth laughing about the less than exemplary teachers that we've had as well. As teachers, we must be grateful for the publishers and composers and resource creators that keep us looking good in our job. December can be an overwhelming time for musicians, but it doesn't have to be. Holiday activities can be reimagined. Human beings universally value 3 things over all others: their children, their money, and their time. Emotions run high in our work because we ask parents to trust us with all 3 of those things. Just like it's become popular to name a word of intention for the new year, a worthwhile exercise is to name one single word for each of your students this year, and maybe even to keep it a secret from them. The easiest way to build a philosophy of teaching is this. Complete this sentence. When it comes to teaching music, this I believe. Then repeat until you're finished. Student evaluations are a game-changing communication tool in your studio, and they do not have to be complicated. The two best questions you can ask yourself routinely are, what is working and what is not? Learning how to turn pages for another pianist is a skill set all its own, and sometimes it changes your entire life. We give a lot of thought to how we begin our lessons, but often very little to how we end them. That should change. We know the importance of warming up as a musician, but what kind of warm-up routines do you have as a teacher? Most people who say they hate online lessons actually hate the circumstances around having to hold online lessons. Sometimes the thing you think is the thing is not really the thing. Keeping positive notes and texts from studio families where we can easily be reminded of them is a lifeline we all need from time to time. Coping with performance anxiety is not about trying to eliminate the anxious feelings. It's about learning to understand how your body responds to those conditions and working through it anyway. Asking the right questions will get you everywhere worth going. What if we stopped telling our students to focus on how great they were going to be 5 years from now, and instead helped them appreciate the musicians they are right now in this very moment? If you find yourself adjudicating for a student event, ask yourself what one thing you can tell that student that is going to make them a more effective musician. Stop making laundry lists of errors they made and give them something they can use moving forward. Young students don't distinguish between small life details and big ones. Everything feels big, so pay attention to all of it. Starting your recital with some pre-show improvisation opportunities is a great way to break the ice and let students shine. The best achievement to reward students for is years of study in your studio. I am categorically obsessed with making sure each of my students can play Happy Birthday in one way, shape, or form. Sometimes we have more free time than we realize because we don't call our rest rest. My number one piece of advice for new teachers: embrace the fact that other teachers are your colleagues, not your competition. Sometimes your colleagues are challenging, but it's likely stemming from insecurities that they are carrying. Show interest in their perspectives, and they'll often soften up. We can solve so many misunderstandings by saying the words, "Tell me more." Take regular opportunities to engage in what I call crazy talk. Think about what you would do if there were no limitations. Facebook groups are great, but there are lots of things you should keep in mind when engaging with teacher groups online. Many times, the thought of making change is much harder than actually making the change. You are more committed to your instrument than your students are. Oof. Everyone has their own unique experiences and priorities when it comes to money. Comments about your tuition fees have nothing to do with you and your value, and everything to do with the relationship the person speaking has with their money. Starting the school year back with exclusively group lessons is a great way to build enthusiasm for the year and ease into fall schedules. You will be miserable in this profession if you think you have any control over when a student decides to stop taking lessons with you. It's a complex decision on their end, and it has very little, if anything at all, to do with you. When you feel discouraged about life, go play your instrument. Music has to be solid before it can be spectacular. Talk less, play more, listen most. Choosing a yearly studio mantra helps students internalize the big picture lessons you want them to remember. Imagination is a valuable commodity and should be dutifully preserved in our young people for as long as possible. When you find yourself planning a new lesson or activity, always ask yourself, what is my objective? Pay attention to the ideas that make you feel restless. Don't disregard your inner critic. Hold your concerns up to the light and decide whether or not they have any merit. Try as we might, we can't eliminate every ounce of discomfort from our students' experience, nor should we want to. The best teachers I know are the ones who are comfortable repeating themselves over and over and over again. Our failed attempts are leading us somewhere. A lesson can still be successful even if a student has not practiced that week. Lessons do not always have to be built on a cycle of assign, practice, pass, repeat, assign, practice, pass, repeat. We cannot hold studio families responsible for our decisions to make exceptions to our studio policies or personal boundaries. I don't teach students from my church or from families we have pre-existing friendships with. It's a boundary that is hard to keep, but it has served me well. When you agree to do a favor for someone, there is an art to making sure they know you're doing them a favor. Change is a part of life, and it's perfectly okay that life has not gone according to your plan. In a job like ours that's so focused on helping others, sometimes it's important to make a list of things that you want. The things that feel like basics in your mind, they aren't basic to other people. We all have ideas worth sharing. Music is a fundamental part of the human spirit. Going deep on the idea of spending time, imagine each time the clock chimes, we are handing over $1 from our wallet. The question is, what are we getting for it? Sometimes it's nice to keep a challenging student or two in the mix of our studio roster. They help keep us sharp, and the payoff can be huge. Building connections and improving skills is the whole point of our work. Don't miss it. If you try to do everything, you'll end up doing none of it really well. Your students need more time to prepare for performances than you think they do. We are never going to get rid of the human element of imperfection in performance. Thank goodness. A performance reflection journal can be an incredibly useful tool in understanding performance anxiety. Performing is like driving a car. You need to keep the vehicle on the road while everyone else gets to enjoy the beautiful scenery. There is no place for power struggles in the studio. The goal is symbiotic relationships where all parties involved feel appreciated by one another. When you sign on a new studio family, choose to believe the best about their intentions. Instead of focusing on what you want to accomplish over the next few months, think about how you want to feel. Students, parents, and teachers need to recognize that there is a difference in being disappointed in a performance and being embarrassed by a performance. Honest is better than perfect. Our teacher hearts infiltrate just about every area of our lives. My rule for dealing with chatty students: listen, but don't contribute. Watching each student overcome their own little battle during a recital performance is the best. There are 3 things I absolutely refuse to spend my mental energy on: how people parent their children, how they spend their money, and how they spend their time. Taking time at the end of a semester to highlight student accomplishments is a great way to deepen commitment to the studio. Sometimes you spend too much time in the barn and you forget how much it stinks. Teaching requires work and heart. The two exist side by side, not wrapped up together. It's okay to view your work as work, even when you love it and know it's bringing good into the world. Who is mentoring you, and who are you mentoring? Teaching is incredible and hard and exhausting and life-giving all at the same time. The creative spirit cannot survive in a world where productivity is king. Focus on relationships and results will follow. Consider holding a week of group classes called Throwback Week, where each student brings a piece to perform that they played more than 1 year ago. It's a blast. Make genuine friendships with your local school music teachers, okay? As teachers, we have to prioritize our own families because that's what our studio families will do, as they should. When quoting someone a price for the cost of your services, worry less about the going rate and instead quote them whatever it will take for you to avoid feeling like you're doing them a favor. We never know what our students are going to do with the skills we help them discover. When introducing a new concept, the best thing you can do is put the book away. When you're tasked with building a new schedule, remember to start and end your week with students you enjoy the most. When it comes to setting goals for your teaching, remember you can't overhaul everything, nor do you need to. Choose one thing. Communicate more with studio families. Remember that even though your studio families do love you, they don't want to hear how busy or stressed you are because they already feel the same way. As studio music teachers, we have to play the long game. Team sports are not the enemy. We have much to learn from them. People don't pay for goods and services. They pay for how those things make them feel. That creative ambition that floods your brain, the things you want to do, not everyone feels that way, so run with them. Sometimes we overschedule ourselves because we like everyone knowing how busy we are. Instead of offering constant corrections to your students, let them experience both sides so they can begin making their own informed choices. Showing up consistently over time yields some pretty impressive results. We learn more from mistakes than we do successes, and so do our students. For better and for worse, every student you work with comes to you with a predetermined impression of the kind of student they are. Teachers without music degrees do not want to be judged for their lack of university study, and teachers with music degrees do not want their efforts and investments dismissed as pointless. January is a gift. There is power in saying things out loud to ourselves. Hope really does pack a good thrill. We haven't arrived yet. We are all still on our way somewhere. Our elementary students need to swim around in their concepts for longer than most materials suggest. Rather than constantly stepping up from one concept to the next, true mastery will come from repeatedly encountering the same concept in lots of repertoire. Sometimes letting your students begin the lesson by playing everything they practiced rather than one piece at a time works wonders. Students should know the value of revisiting previous repertoire. When adjudicating an event, you have 2 jobs. One encourage the student to keep playing music. And 2, offer something to help them grow. Establishing predictable routines in our lessons also gives us the opportunity to break them so our students feel seen, cared for, and creative. It's okay to let a student pass a piece before it's fully perfected. Transfer students are the ultimate human puzzle. Treat people like your favorites, and they will often become just that. When a student plays something that feels less than secure, ask them to play it as though it ended with an exclamation point rather than a question mark. We really need to be better bosses to ourselves. If you attend a workshop or a conference on teaching, keep a list of your students with you at all times so you can quickly jot down repertoire ideas or new approaches that you come across to try. You think you're going to remember later, but you won't. We are all equally human. That includes your piano teacher heroes and your celebrity crushes. The best way to become a better teacher is to record yourself teaching and then watch it back. Our students do not need every single lesson to be amazing. Their takeaway is a sum of the whole experience. One justification for charging higher tuition rates is so you can afford to offer scholarships and other opportunities within your community. You can be generous without going broke, my friends. Thank goodness for students who surprise us. We all have deal breakers, which can result in needing to dismiss a student from our studio. Just know that teacher groups on Facebook should not be your primary guiding force on this matter, since no one there actually knows the full picture. When a student comes to us in an emotionally vulnerable state, sometimes the best thing we can do is get their attention on the music and teach them that music is indeed a source of comfort that will be there for them their entire life. You can be compassionate without compromising your financial security. Learning to assess actual progress, not just the number of pieces completed, will change your teacher life. Make a list of the things you would like to change. Even if you're not going to take action or can't do anything to change it, there's power in naming the things we wish were different. As James Clear reminds us in Atomic Habits, you get what you repeat. As Robert Duke reminds us in Intelligent Music Teaching, what we say in a lesson is far less important than what our students do. In The Gifts of Imperfection, Brené Brown teaches us that shame can only survive in a vacuum. Talking about our insecurities is the only way to work through them. In The Mindful Musician, Vanessa Cornett makes the point, and I quote, "No performance coaching, no mental skills training, no nifty books or websites, no anxiety management techniques can compensate for a genuine lack of preparation." End quote, and amen. In Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert talks about one of my favorite obsessive thoughts, the paradox of creative living. Meaning we have to believe our work is of the utmost importance and completely inconsequential all at the same time. In their book Burnout, Emily and Amelia Nagoski introduce the absolute importance of completing the stress cycle to avoid lasting effects of stress. In The Ways Children Learn Music, Eric Bluestein offers the important reminder that teachers often confuse learning to play the instrument with learning to read music. The two are not the same. In Under Pressure, Lisa D'Amour reminds us that there are healthy types of stress, and we should be careful not to try and eliminate all discomfort from our teenagers' lives. There is nothing new under the sun. And Frances Clark, who I call Queen Frances, was talking about overscheduled piano students in 1984. Reading Questions and Answers reminds us of the timeless nature of all things piano teaching. No one does everything. Own the things that you do not do. It's okay. Sometimes communication requires more bravery than we want it to. The amount of emotional labor that comes with our work should never be discounted. Teacher life means understanding that you have knowledge and skills worth sharing, but also there is so much more to be learned. Both statements have to be true at the same time. Method books are static resources, which means they are never going to be able to adapt to every student in every circumstance. That's why your students have you. The metronome is an accountability tool, not an answer to your rhythmic problems. Focus on those things that will last. Adults will often say they want better for future generations, yet we're also the first to complain when things appear easier for young people. Once a musician, always a musician. No one can take that title away from you. Goals are stepping stones, not final destinations. The biggest mistake we make with teen students is thinking we can communicate less frequently with their parents. The most important thing for students to hear from their parents and their teacher is, "I love to hear you play." Rested teachers are better teachers. Taking regular breaks from teaching benefits all parties involved. The process of learning is more valuable than the content itself. Play is a mindset. It's not a collection of activities. Spend time in your lessons listening to music. When practicing, the most detrimental thought is, "I should already be able to do this." Building traditions in your studio is a great way to strengthen your student retention rates. Our students' outward appearances can be very deceiving. Dinner does not need to be a production. We all need to stop worrying about how our students are representing us to the outside and instead simply concentrate on giving really great lessons. Release the weight of potential. Frustrated with recital participation? Harness the power of FOMO. Our own egos are the drivers of many studio frustrations and disappointments. This is not all a bad thing, but hey, let's call a spade a spade. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in describing how to do something, we forget to explain what we're trying to do in the first place. If it's worth using, it's worth paying for. Students don't hate practicing. They hate being confused, intimidated, and embarrassed by practicing. It's important to watch our students play from multiple angles. Never dismiss your students' likes and dislikes. Sometimes a piano string breaking mid-performance is the best thing that could happen to your spring piano recital. Invest in researching what behavior is age appropriate. If you're going to hold a strong opinion on something, you'd better be able to name the merits of the other side. Otherwise, you don't know enough to hold the belief you do. Lighter summers are amazing. Don't overcompensate for quiet students by being louder yourself. Sometimes creativity flourishes best within constraints. When it comes to online communities, give more than you take. So much of our creative work as adults is really an attempt to reconnect with the artist we were as children. There really is no class system amongst musicians, friends. Collegiate faculty, independent studio teachers, preschool teachers, We're all on the same mission, and it's time for any illusion of elitism to see itself out the door. Being an independent teacher who can set her own boundaries and design her own programs is a wonderful thing, but the overwhelm of flexibility can be a real bear. Teaching students to perform under pressure builds skills far beyond the concert stage. Sometimes asking what if is the first step to a wonderful adventure. The key to dealing with everyone else's expectations of you is to address your expectations for yourself first. Your resume rarely reflects the most important things about you. Always be on the lookout for commitments that are draining your zest for life. The idea of fairness when it comes to your studio policies is more complicated than it appears on the surface. Sometimes piano lessons are just piano lessons for kids or their families, and that's okay. Just because you can teach without other teacher friends doesn't mean you should. Allow me to explain the Lego problem. Building from directions is a completely different skill than building from imagination, and our piano students are no different. Playing beside our students from a second piano is an absolute game changer for the lesson experience. Real parental investment in lessons goes far beyond paying for the tuition. Where are your eyes when your students are playing? Are you watching the music or your student? 5 core values of everything beyond measure: authenticity, connection, humility, curiosity, and play. Some days you're going to have a shovel, and some days you're only going to have a spoon. But either way, show up and move some dirt. Sometimes we need to take a step way back and practice unseeing the lesson experience. Teacher words hold more authority than we realize. Listening assignments really do matter. Students asking for Thanksgiving music? Have them write their own using an existing tune. Sometimes we need to put our cameras away and experience the moment for what it is. There are many great gifts for music teachers that don't involve treble clef jewelry. Who we are becoming on this teacher journey is so much more than what we are doing. When you feel overwhelmed by the need to do everything, just do something. And lastly, last week in episode 199, we talked about the fact that teacher actions really do speak louder than teacher words. Whew, oh my goodness, friends, we did it! 199 episodes recapped right here in episode 200. Congratulations if you made it to the end of this rundown. Truth be told, I thought this was going to be an easy episode, and it was actually quite a challenge to put together. But regardless of the end result, I will say reliving each and every episode of this podcast thus far was a really great exercise for me. It's so interesting to see trends in the topics and reflect on how that corresponded to where I was in life at the time. I really hope you enjoyed reliving the journey with me as well. And I just want to remind you that in this week's show notes, you're going to find a link to a download with everything you heard here today, as well as ways to support my work. If you've found value in my podcast these past 200 episodes, please do consider joining the Patreon community, even if it's just for a month or two, as a sign that you want me to continue doing this work. Speaking of my Patreon friends, to those who support me over there, I just have to say, there are many weeks where yours are the friendships who I find sustaining me in my actual real life. And I don't know, I just seriously cannot imagine life without you in it. Like, where would we be without each other? I don't even know. So thank you for believing in me enough to throw a few dollars at me every month. As the premise of this show has been from the beginning, we are one another's lifelines in this work, friends. As far as I'm concerned, teacher friends keep the world going round. Thanks for being here for the first 200 episodes. Now let's keep this train a-rolling. Onward and upward toward the next few hundred episodes together, my friends.